Judge McCasey, who went on to be the AG, he actually gave instructions to the jury about The Sopranos. So, there's a lot of similarities between both the show and real life.
Welcome to the Cops and Writers Podcast. Your host, Sergeant Patrick O'Donnell, worked the streets in one of the nation's largest police departments for over 25 years. Ride along with O'Donnell and his expert guests as they help you navigate the oftentimes confusing and misunderstood world of law enforcement. O'Donnell and his guests on this show do not represent any law enforcement agency. The content of this show is not meant to be legal advice. If you think you need a lawyer, you probably do.
Hey, Cops and Writers, thanks for being here with us today for another episode of the Cops and Writers Podcast. I'm Patrick O'Donnell, and I'll be your host for today's show. This show is listener supported, so thanks to all of you who keep the show going. I would especially like to thank those of you who are patrons of the show. Your generosity helps pay for the software, equipment, and my time producing this show. Yes, you too can become a patron for less than a cup of coffee or a pint of Guinness. Just go over to patreon.com/Cops and Writers. If you're interested in actually seeing these interviews, head on over to Cops and Writers. Welcome back, everyone, for the conclusion of my interview with author and retired FBI Special Agent Séamus McElearney. Séamus McElearney began his distinguished career with the FBI in 1998, joining Squad C-10 of the New York Organized Crime Branch, tasked with investigating the Bonanno and DeCavalcante crime families, infamously known as the Real Sopranos. In December 1999, he was assigned to arrest Anthony Capo, a violent soldier in the DeCavalcante family, as part of a sweeping indictment. Not only did he safely execute the arrest, but he also achieved a historic breakthrough, persuading Capo to become the first made member of the family's century-long history to cooperate with law enforcement. This unprecedented move triggered a domino effect of cooperation that ultimately led to the dismantling of the DeCavalcante family. In all, 71 defendants were convicted. 11 murders were solved. Following this 6-year investigation, Seamus was promoted to lead Squad C-38, overseeing the Colombo crime family. Under his leadership, the squad dismantled the Colombos through a series of operations, including spearheading the largest mafia takedown in FBI history. As supervisor, Seamus oversaw investigations that led to the conviction of more than 200 defendants and the resolution of 20 murders. Throughout his career as an agent and supervisor, Seamus helped convict 10 mafia bosses, recover 5 bodies, and solve a murder of an NYPD officer. He was part of a historic FBI teams that dismantled 3 organized crime families, an achievement no one else can claim. Seamus is also an author of the popular book Flippin' Capo, How the FBI Dismantled the Real Sopranos. I'm a fan of the TV show Sopranos, so it was amazing for me to listen to Seamus explain how the real Sopranos operated and how they dismantled and brought them to justice. Please enjoy my conversation with Seamus.
I think he was initially looking at like close to 20 to 30 years. And then when he came into proffer, which is a big step, right? We have to put yourself in their shoes. Okay, so when they come into proffer, that's an agreement, right, between the government and the lawyer and the actual defendant, where they have to tell us the truth. We can't use their words against them unless they lie,
All right.
but they have to come in and they have to tell us all their crimes. So as I said before, those are the first 3 things that he tells us. First, he has to eat the indictment. What I mean by that is making sure that he admits his role in the crimes that he's charged with, which he did. And then he tells us those 3 things, which, he's not charged with: the leak, the murder of Fred Weiss, and the murder of John D'Amato, where John D'Amato, he was the shooter. So now he's gone from exposing himself to 20 to 30 years to exposing himself to life. Big difference. Big difference, right?
Yeah.
That's a leap of trust right there.
Yeah, it is. Big
So,
time.
um, you know, and as I said, he could have said no and just decided to try to roll the dice. And you never know, as we all know, trying to get 12 people on a jury to
Right.
agree
Yeah,
is a really
absolutely.
hard thing to do.
It
And
absolutely
these
is.
guys have gotten to juries before too. So you never know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Now, he was a soldier. I know we're talking
Mhm.
about ranks like, made
Yep.
man,
Yep.
captains, whatever. Could you kind of give us a
Sure.
quick lesson in mob,
Yep.
rank
Okay.
structure?
So it goes from associate to soldier. The soldier is a made member in the family. That's the first entry level made member of the family. Then you have a captain. Then you have a consigliere, you have an underboss, and the boss. So the captain basically would have a crew of soldiers that report to him. The
Okay.
consigliere is basically the arbitrator of the family. So any disputes would come to him. And then you have the underboss and the boss makes the ultimate decisions.
Okay.
So a made member would start with a soldier on up. So soldiers, captains, consigliere, underboss, and boss are the made members of the family. An associate is not a made member of the family.
Okay. So an associate is kind of like a hang around, I think about motorcycle clubs,
Right.
that kind of
And
thing.
they're hoping to become a proposed associate, meaning their name is up for membership within the family. And at
Okay.
that point, what happens is their name would be circulated among the five families to be inducted into the family. So what happens is like your name would be put on a list, circulated to the five families, and those five families in New York, which we know are Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, Colombo. If someone had a beef with someone on that list, they could say no, that guy shouldn't
Okay.
be accepted to be a made member. And
Now,
we've at, and based upon all the witnesses that we've had over the years, we've actually been able to obtain those lists
wow.
as a sample for and as a government exhibit, which has been great.
Yeah, I bet. Now, there's a ceremony when you became a made man. There's a ceremony. Can you
Mhm.
tell us what that involves?
Sure. So with the DeCavalcantes, when Anthony Capo got made, he went to like first of all they try to be very discreet when
Sure.
you're not supposed to know you're going to get made, right? So when you're brought to a house, you do all sorts of counter surveillance. You go through one house to another, you get picked up and dropped off a couple of times. You're not supposed to know that you get made. So when you go to the ceremony, they ask you, do you know why you're here? You say you don't know why you're there, even though you're dressed in a suit. So that's the first thing, right? So that's like the first lie, really,
Right.
right? So then you go there, and in the DeCavalcante family, what they would do is they would lock up, meaning that all the made members would hold hands and lock up. Anthony was not a made member, so he couldn't lock up at that particular time. He got made with another guy at that day. I think it was Frank Garacci, what was his name, if I remember correctly. And then, as you've read about and heard in the books, they prick your finger with blood, and then they put it in the saint of a card. They put the saint on fire, and it burns in your hand. And what you're basically doing is you're swearing your allegiance to their family as opposed to your own family, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right?
Right.
That their family is above your own family. And it's also kind of sacrilegious too, right? You're burning
I would think so.
a saint, right?
Yeah.
I think our Irish parents would be a little annoyed by that.
Yes, they would.
So, and then they just talk about the rules, right? Where you're not supposed to hit a made member, you're not supposed to be with a member's wife. There's all sorts of rules. You're not supposed to do drugs, even though they do. So there's all these rules that they have too. And then at the end of the ceremony, Anthony Capo they would lock up again. And now that he's a made member, they would actually lock up together.
Now, was
And
there
he
any?
got made he got made after the murder of Fred Weiss. So Fred Weiss got killed in September 11th of 1989. Horrible date, as we all know.
Yeah.
And then he subsequently got made, I think, that winter.
Hmm.
And he got made because of his participation in that murder. And he was the driver in that murder.
Interesting.
Vincent Palermo and Gallo were actually the shooters. And James Gallo is the guy that I had mentioned earlier who
Yeah.
accidentally shot Joseph Canigliaro, who paralyzed him.
What a mess.
So,
But yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I've heard about those ceremonies. I heard about the burning of the saints. And like, was there ring kissing? Isn't there something with rings or something like that too, or not?
He didn't talk about that then,
Okay.
but I'm not surprised. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Every family has their own little unique
I'm sure
technique that they do.
I'm sure they
You know?
do. So why are we so fascinated with mobsters? There's almost a romantic notion to these killers. They're stone cold, they're bullies, they're killers, they're thugs.
I think it all goes back to the movies that are made, right? I think the public is just infatuated with it, how they try to to make them bigger than what they really are. And I
Yeah.
think the public just likes it. There's always The Godfather out there. There's always these types of movies. Goodfellas is a great, movie that really is kind of true to life,
Yeah.
which really does try to capture that. I've been involved in that type of a movie as well, where, you know, years later, related to Goodfellas, we actually did a search it was Jimmy Burke's a basement where we solved a 44-year-old homicide.
Oh.
We actually did a dig there too.
Oh, wow.
So
Interesting. Yeah, we
yeah.
just, it's like even like college kids, there's posters of Scarface, in their dorm
Mhm.
rooms and stuff. And I'm like, where's this coming from? But boy, it seems it doesn't die down. It's a thing.
Just seems like the public cannot get enough of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're talking a little bit about WITSEC,
Mhm.
Witness Protection, and I know that's run by the marshals, run WITSEC, but what's the FBI's role? You have to keep this rat safe in and
Right.
out of jail. How do you do that without giving away trade secrets, obviously?
Right. So there's a whole process, as you just mentioned, the U.S. Marshals run the program. So there's a lot of paperwork that has to go into that, right? And the marshals are so successful because it's so strict. For instance, if a witness is in the program and they try to call me, they can't call me directly. They have to go through the marshals.
Hmm.
A certain number would pop up on my screen, and I would know someone from the program is trying to call me. I'm not allowed to know where the witness is. Anthony Capo thought he was slick. He would tell me the type of football teams that he likes. So he'd be like, "Oh, I like the Lions now," or "I like the
Okay.
Browns." So I would know where he actually is, which I shouldn't know.
Right.
But the program works because they are so strict. What we would have too is we had many, many trials. So we would have to debrief the witnesses. And if they were in the program, we wouldn't fly to the state that they were actually in. So the marshals would have to move them, and they
Hmm.
would, if Anthony was in, say, Detroit, we couldn't go to Detroit to meet him, and I wouldn't even know that he's in that state. The
Right.
marshals would pick him up, and they would, I would use the word clean themselves in a sense, as they would take numerous flights
Okay.
to get us to say to go to Maine, and we would meet him there. Meanwhile, I would just take a direct flight to Maine. Meanwhile, Anthony might take 3 flights to get to Maine. So
Okay.
they're trying to wash themselves to make sure that there's no one trying to follow them.
Okay.
Um, like things like that. But it works because they keep them safe. There's a process though. It's not like you just fill out the paperwork and the marshals say, okay, you can go to this state. There's also different phases of WITSEC too. The public thinks, okay, you get new ID and you just go into the program. There are prisons that you have to go to. Like Anthony Capo went to prison for a couple of years before he went into, I would say, phase 2 of the program. He
Okay.
went to prison for 4 years. There's certain facilities throughout the states. I can't say where they actually are,
Right. Right.
but they actually house them in these facilities, and it's kind of a good place to be for the witness because you're not in a general population where
That's
you're
what I was
with
gonna say.
guys that
You're not gonna last.
right, because you're in the same boat, so you don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to try to
Okay.
fight to say like you're a big guy. So you're all doing the same time. So there's certain
Ah.
facilities within the states that you're there. So that's the first phase. So that's the first thing that the public doesn't really know, that you have to go to prison. It's not like you just get a free pass.
Okay.
Then once you do your time, then you go into like the My Blue Heaven stage
Yeah.
where you
I
get
love that movie. That's
like
hilarious. Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, there's, as I said, the marshals do a great job there, but there's a lot of paperwork you have to do there. And the marshals, they have to make sure, okay, Patrick and Seamus, if they're in the same case, they're not going to the same state.
Mm,
So they're looking at the map of the US, making sure where the witness is.
gotcha.
Also, back to the first point is, and this is what defense attorneys try to do all the time, is they'll try to say your witnesses got together and they colluded and
Sure.
made up a story. So when they're in prison or even in phase 2, you make sure that they're never together.
Mm.
so that they can never get their story straight. And one of the things that we had at trial here was, they were trying to say that all these witnesses, which we flipped after, that they got together before they were arrested and they decided that they were going to cooperate. And that is so farthest from the truth, is because Vincent Palermo, right before everyone got arrested, wanted to kill everybody. He wanted to kill like 5 people. So the last thing that you would do as a mob guy, be like, hey, Vinny, why don't we decide to all cooperate
You're right.
before we get arrested? It's like you would never say that, because next thing you know, you're on the hit list too.
Sure. Sure.
So that didn't happen. But the program works so well with the marshals because they are so strict. And when you have trials, you're constantly bringing witnesses in and out, and they just do a tremendous job with that, making sure that they get there safely, related to trial prep. That's a lot of work on them
Oh
because
yeah.
it demands a lot of manpower, but there's a lot of administrative work. There's a polygraph they have to take, and what they're ultimately doing is they're making sure that a witness or a potential witness is not going into the program to hurt somebody else.
Mm.
That's what they really want to try to do.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
to switch gears a little bit, 9/11, that changed everything. You were in
Horrible
the
times. Yep.
FBI when that occurred. You know,
Yes, I was.
where were you and what were you doing that day?
Okay, so that morning, my brother and myself, we had built a nice sized gym within our house.
Okay.
And there's a whole process I talk about within the book about how I
Hmm.
took over my house from my parents. We weren't even there at the time, but we had built the house. We built the basement into a nice gym. So that morning we were there, and my mom yelled down to us that the plane had struck the building. At that time, my brother was a police officer for the FBI. The FBI has their own police force where they kind of guard the buildings, making sure people are not coming in and out of the building.
Sure.
Uh, and even to rewind with my brother, he started in the FBI in 1999 as a mechanic and then
Okay.
became an FBI police officer. And I'm really, really proud of him because after that, he went to our surveillance group and then he became an agent, and he's still there today. He's
That's
actually a
awesome.
supervisor of a white collar squad. And at the end of my career, we actually got to work together,
Ah,
which
that's
was
great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was really good. But back then, as I said, he was a police officer, and then our phones just started to go off.
Sure.
At that time, we were told to go down to Foley Square, which was a very public place. And you don't know what really had happened, right? So
Right.
I'm just thinking to myself, that's really not a good idea if we're under attack to have 300 or 400 agents to be out in the open like that.
Right.
So I kind of waited to, I started to drive. We got ready, we got dressed, we went down right away. I told him just to be safe because he had to go to 26 Federal Plaza. I started to go down the east side, and you're starting to see everyone starting to walk north. And then they finally told us to go to the 26th Street garage. Actually, Martha Stewart is upstairs in that building. So we went there, and you're just trying to account for everybody,
Yeah.
just make sure everyone was safe. We started to hear whispers that Lenny Hatton, who was a bomb tech on C-19, a bank like robbery squad, was missing,
Oh boy.
and we had heard that he had ran into the building.
Uh,
Then also John O'Neill. John O'Neill had just recently retired, and he was head of security for the World Trade Center.
oh jeez.
And John O'Neill was one of the guys who first brought about Osama bin Laden, brought it to the Bureau's attention.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, and I think there's books on him, there's
Yeah.
movies on him, but he was the guy that first brought up Osama bin Laden years beforehand. And John had just retired and was head of security for the World Trade Center. So we go to the garage, we account for everyone that we have. It's probably 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning now, and we're told to our group is told to go home and come back that night.
Okay.
So we're told to come back around 10 o'clock that night, and we were going to go into the pit that night. And just it was just a surreal experience, to tell you the truth.
Oh God.
They had lit the place up because there was no lights.
Sure.
You're seeing the firemen who are just dazed and confused. I remember a story where next to Borders bookstore, where they used to have these huge windows there, and I saw three of the firemen sitting down there, and I'll never forget the image that I have in my head where the window was sheared up top like this,
Yeah.
right? And they were underneath the window,
Oh
and they were
boy.
just so out of it. I ran over there and I
Yeah.
pulled them away because if the remaining glass
Oh,
had fell, it would have
yeah.
cut their heads off.
Right.
So it just the things that they experienced that day are just horrible, just a horrible, horrible time. And I do remember a good friend of mine worked on the 84th floor, and he had been married a month to the day. He got married on August 11th. And unfortunately, he died that day.
Man.
But I was able to find his vehicle because he drove down that morning and parked in a lot. The vehicle was demolished. A
Sure.
couple of days later, I found it, but I was able to get his contents and actually give it to his wife. But just a horrible time. But I would, not to say this is good, but I would say that the relationships built with the agencies during that time period, the partnerships, like I know you always hear these stories where the PD doesn't get along with the FBI or the DEA doesn't get
Right.
along with this agency, blah, blah, blah. The partnerships that people had during that time period was just phenomenal. And what I mean by that is we would show up together and go to the garage, the 26th Street garage, and you would get leads. And it didn't matter who you worked with. You might work for someone from the post office or from the DEA, and you would go out and you would do leads. It didn't matter who you were. You just did the lead together and you got the job done. And I do remember too that we actually spent a couple of nights on the boat there too, getting the name of it. But just to make sure people weren't in the water too.
Uh,
So it was just a crazy time period. And at that point in time, all our investigations went on hold for probably about 4 to 5 months.
okay.
So, like your status conferences related to organized crime cases that we had, they all just went on hold and everyone worked this for the next 4 or 5 months. But it was a crazy time, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
And where were you in
you know,
the Capo deal when that occurred? Like what?
well, at that point in time, that was September 2001, right?
Yeah.
So at that point in time, we had flipped Capo in December of 99. Because of where he was, Vincent Palermo, he reported to him. Vincent Palermo was the acting boss. Vincent Palermo was a businessman. He decided to flip. So we go from having no one in 100 years flip to
No.
Anthony flipping and then
Jeez.
Vincent Palermo flipping.
Okay.
Then a month later, Victor DiChiara flips. So now we have three people. So there's a whole process that you go through of proffering people and trying to get them into a cooperation agreement. Excuse me.
Yeah.
What they do is they have to plead guilty, and they have to plead guilty to all their crimes. So we use those three people to have our next round of indictments. And that takes place in October of 2000. We just passed the 25th anniversary of that. In that indictment, we arrest the official boss, two acting panel bosses, the consigliere, um, captains, and soldiers, and an associate by the name of Frank Scarabino. Frank Scarabino, thankfully, comes forward and tells us that he's got a contract to kill Anthony Capo, his kids, and a contract on law enforcement.
Wow.
So that kind of blew us away,
Sure.
right? Where you got to put yourself in Anthony's shoes. He's in prison and he's defenseless. So I'm the only person that he has to help his family. The wrinkle that we had is that his wife didn't want to move.
Mm.
So that was very hard for me to keep her safe when she refused to leave Staten Island.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it was a very hard thing to do, to keep her safe, but we did. Thankfully, Frank Scarabino did not act upon that. I still speak to Frank to this day.
Oh wow.
He decided to cooperate as well. And so then he cooperates that we, stop that threat. As I said, there was a threat against law enforcement. Of course, I'm the handler of Anthony Capo, so I'm concerned. This is, I know that there's threats related to the job, but I'm a new agent. So of course, this is a jolt. So, you have to watch hear back all the time. Even to this day, with my current job, I give safety tips and active shooter training.
Sure.
Biggest piece of advice I give people all the time is be aware of your surroundings at all
Yep.
times, right? That's the most important
Absolutely.
thing you can
Yep.
do. So we have that, and we're just continuing to build the case. And now we have four cooperators. As I
Okay.
mentioned, as I mentioned before, we had that initial arrest in December of 1999. There was a guy named Tommy DeTora who was arrested then, but was out on bail. He sees that everybody's starting to cooperate, and he was involved in that murder of Joseph Canigliaro, the guy that was in the wheelchair. So he has had conversations with Anthony Capo and Vincent Palermo about the murder. So he says, let me get on board before the train leaves the station. So, so we get him to make probably one of the best consensual recordings the Bureau has ever made, where he's out on bail and we get every participant in that murder together and they talk about their role in the murder.
Wow.
And the shooter was a guy named Marty Lewis. And Marty Lewis shot Joseph Canigliaro in his own car. And when he got out of the car, Joseph Canigliaro basically drove himself away, got up to the corner, puts his signal on, and drives himself to the hospital. We have this all on we have this all on tape. Him saying this.
Wow.
This is priceless for trial. There was another guy who was involved in the murder conspiracy named Joseph Brightson. So Brightson, you got to put yourself in his shoes. He thinks that Joe Pitts is dead. That's his nickname. Joe Pitts doesn't go directly to the hospital. He stops at Joe Brightson's house
Oh my
and
God.
beeps his horn for Joe Brightson to come downstairs. So can you imagine Joe Brightson looking out the window, seeing Joe Pitts downstairs, thinking that he should be dead, to him to get in the vehicle with them? So
Oh,
that must have been an awkward conversation to the hospital.
yeah, I would think. Oh my gosh, that's
And
hilarious.
and unfortunately, when they get to the hospital, Joe Brightson called his cousin, who was an NYPD detective, and the NYPD detective came to the hospital and removed the case shells.
Oh,
Uh, he, so this leads to another round of indictments.
yeah.
More people get arrested, and then after that, we have a captain who cooperated. His name is Anthony Rotundo. What's great about Anthony Rotundo is Anthony Rotundo. You can say some people went to college. Graduated from college, so he was a great witness for us. He testified for me for about 7 times. Anthony also testified for me for 7 times. So, and that's not even the times that these guys were prepped for trial, where people decided at the last minute to plead guilty because they knew that these guys were so good on the stand.
Wow.
So we have all these indictments, and I'm getting to, we then arrest the guy Fritzy, who I mentioned before, for the leak, and that's in August of 2001. And then that takes us to 9/11 the following month, and everything is put on hold because of 9/11 for
Oh, yeah.
about 4 or 5 months. And then when we come back, then you start the plea process and the trial process, which, if I remember correctly, I was on trial probably from December 2002 up until November of 2003. So I basically had a year of no life. And I think the difference between the state and the Fed is at the Fed level, the agents actually sit at the table
Mm.
as opposed to the state level where they don't really sit at the table. You might come with the assistant, help them with the case, and then you kind of leave. With us, you're at the table the whole trial.
Okay.
And the second trial I had probably was the longest one, where it was at least 2 months straight. So yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a year of no life whatsoever. They all got convicted, which was great. When I look back at the stats, I think we convicted 71 people, 11 homicides were solved. We had probably 7 trials. Even during that year, if you remember, 2003, there was a blackout too, where the whole East region went
Oh, that's
out.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And Anthony, it was Capo was on trial. He was testifying that day when the actual lights went out. And at first we just thought it was the courthouse, right? But it
Yeah.
turned out to be the whole East region. There's
Wow.
some funny stories within the book related to that
Yep.
night
There is.
that I had to spend at 26 Federal Plaza with some friends.
So, what was the time frame? How long from point A to point Z to take to put all this together and, go through all this whole shooting match for the DeCavalcante crime family?
It's probably all in all 6 years from
God, that's a
beginning to
long
end.
time. My
Yeah,
God.
it's a long time, and it's like it doesn't really end, especially when you have trials,
Yeah.
because there's an appeal process that you go through. So these things can go on for years. After I got done with this case, um, I thought I was really too new to do this. To tell you the truth, I only had 6 years on the job,
Yeah.
but they wanted me to go down and run the Colombo squad.
Mm,
And I said, "Oh, I'm flattered, but I really don't think I should be doing that at this stage of my life. I'm only 6 years on the job. There's a lot more to learn."
right.
And I was voluntold to go down there. So I went down and I ran that squad from December of 2004 up until June of 2013. And we actually dismantled that family as well. During that time period, though, everyone had kind of moved on. Like assistants had went into the private sector,
Mm.
agents had gone down to Washington, as we discussed before. Very unique for me to stay there, right?
Right. Very much so. Yeah.
They constantly wanted me to go down to DC. I didn't want to do that. I don't know if you know like pay structures within the FBI, but from a supervisor to the next level would be an assistant special agent in charge. There's actually no monetary incentive at all. I mean, zero, absolutely none. It's like so,
No
and
incentive, period. Yes.
yeah. So, and I'm not one of those guys that needed the title. So,
Right.
and I had just met my wife, so I was not going to move. She was not going to move. She has her own job.
Sure.
So I decided I'm not going to do that. And I stayed with the Colombo family. We were doing great things there. I remember when I first got down there too, it wasn't really appealing because when I got down there, they had 8 supervisors in 8 years. And I was like, I'm going from a squad where it
Oh,
was all love and everyone got along
yeah.
to a squad that seems very dysfunctional.
You're right.
And I said, if I come down there, stability has to happen. So, and I was not the type of person just to say yes. So I said, be careful what you wish for. And things worked out really well, and we ended up taking down that family too.
So, you guys had so many arrests with the DeCavalcante family, indictments, arrests, convictions, and you took a big chunk of that family out of commission. Whenever that happens, there's a void, and the void is usually sucked up by somebody. Who filled the void?
They had a hard time, what I mean, because we really did hit them really, really hard, and I
Yeah.
don't really think they really have recovered from it.
Okay.
They had put people up, uh, in those positions, but I think it took them a long time to recover from that. And one of the things that was good is just working with the local like types of police departments there too.
Okay.
It was really strange, right? When we talk about it, how you had the New York FBI taking down the Jersey family. Um, again was young at the time, but I know that we did try to work with the leadership from the New Jersey office at that time as well.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they wanted to do their own investigation, which I thought was very short-sighted because we had the witnesses. Now, again, I'm not saying that for FBI New Jersey as a whole. I'm just talking about that particular organized crime squad at that time,
Yeah.
the leaders at that particular time. For some reason, they didn't want to work with us. They had their own cases, but uh, you know, but when we would do arrest over there, of course, we'd have to work with them and tell them,
Oh
and they
yeah,
would be
absolutely.
on our arrest teams. And then what happens is too is there's the main office within New Jersey, just like there is in New York, and then there's other offices within New York. And we did do many other cases with some of the other New Jersey offices where
Mm.
we helped them with trials. I actually
Oh,
had a
okay.
witness. Anthony testified at a couple of their trials as well. So there was other. They're called like an RA. It's like an offshoot of the main like office. So they
Okay.
would help them as well. So,
Gotcha.
but yeah, for
Now,
some reason, the main organized crime squad at that time, the leader, whoever it was, I don't even know, decided not to work with us. So.
That's unfortunate, but whatever. Now, how did the DeCavalcante crime family coexist with the five families in New York? You watch The Sopranos, and every now and then, Tony would have to go up to New York and have a sit down with, they'd have dinner and drink wine and, all that kind of stuff. What did that look like in reality?
Right. So there are the five main families in New York, and the Jersey family was known as the sixth family. What they were is they were very closely aligned with the Gambino family, though. And, when you read the book, you'll see that, as I mentioned
Right.
before, the murder of Fred Weiss. The murder of Fred Weiss was basically the Gambinos and the DeCavalcantes trying to kill Fred Weiss at the same time as a favor to Gotti. So, and, not me, but this is how they describe them as a farm team, to the Gambino family. But they, were known as the sixth family. So not as big or as strong as the five families in New York.
Okay. Now, were there like meetings where they would physically sit down with each other and, like go over like
Mhm.
splitting up, okay, you have this section, I have this section, blah, blah, blah.
So what happened was the guy that I mentioned got killed, John D'Amato. So John D'Amato was the acting boss of the DeCavalcante family in the early 1990s. The official boss was John Riggi. John Riggi was in jail at that particular time. So when you have the official boss in jail, you have to have someone acting on the street. John Riggi used to meet John Gotti every Tuesday, and they would discuss
Oh,
business. And that's when John Gotti reached out to John D'Amato and said, "Hey, we want Fred Weiss killed." John D'Amato was trying to ingratiate himself to the Gambino family and kind of put the DeCavalcantes on the same playing level as the other five families. And that's why he agreed to kill Fred Weiss, or have the DeCavalcantes kill
okay.
Fred Weiss. And that became a race between the two families to kill Fred Weiss. And actually, our witnesses tell us that there is like cross surveillance where the DeCavalcantes saw the Gambinos and the Gambinos saw the DeCavalcantes doing surveillance on Fred Weiss.
Wow, that's amazing. That's something
Yeah.
else. Now, this is all coming to a head and, all the trial stuff, went through and Anthony was waiting for his sentencing hearing.
Mhm.
And that's when he had the Widowmaker, and that pretty much ended his life. And you attended the wake of Anthony. Could you tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that? Because that really humanizes stuff. It's like, okay, this Anthony Capo, not a nice guy. He's done a lot of terrible stuff in his life, but he still has a mom and a dad. He still has, a wife and children, etc. And you were there for through so much of this. You were talking about like at your own father's wake. He called you and, gave condolences. So what was that
Well, and
like?
that's something too. It's like with the witnesses, I say all the time, is you can't pick your family, right? So you don't know if the wife knows what type of life that these guys are into. The kids don't know. So even with the witnesses we have, we always want to make sure that the kids are stable. The kids have a right path in life, making sure they get into school properly. So then they're not scarred for life, right? So if you become a social worker, so because of the bond that I had with Anthony, I'm not saying that we were great friends or anything, but we did have a relationship together. I just thought it was the right thing to do. And, I thought about it and I was like, it's the right thing to do to go because I had developed a relationship with his mom and his stepfather and his sister and his ex-wife and kids. So I did go to pay my respects. I think they were happy for me to be there to pay my respects, and I just thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I listened to the audio book. I didn't buy the paperback. I love audio. And that was surprising to me. Not that, you're a human person, that you're a decent person and like I said before, there's families involved, but it just highlighted the fact that, it's like, yeah, like you said, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. And there's collateral damage with these things. And, yeah, I really like that. That was It was an unexpected treat almost. It's like, yeah, this makes, to me it made total sense. It's to others maybe it wouldn't, but to me it's like, oh yeah, absolutely. Now, with mobster culture, from what I understood, old school mobsters never messed with women or children. When did this change?
Well, there was an incident in the 1990s, I believe, where Pete Chioda, who was a witness for the Lucchese family, for the government, his sister got shot. So that was that was not supposed to be done, and it was viewed as being a horrible act. So they got a lot of grief for that.
Yeah.
Then, as I said, in 1999, Frank Polizzi was the one that gave the order to hurt Anthony Capo and his family. Frank Polizzi was very sick at the time, and they wanted to go back to the old Sicilian ways to do that. It's frowned upon. It hasn't happened, and I think the mobsters know that if they were to do such a thing, the heat of the government would be brought upon them really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't think they have done it since. I don't think they're gonna do it. I think the mob has gotten smarter too, in the sense is the last like 10 years or so, violence attracts law enforcement. So I don't think they're gonna do that.
Now, I know, like with Rico in the 90s, a lot of the mob was disassembled as compared to the old days, quote unquote. How prevalent are they still in the United States, do you think?
Well, that's a question that I've been asked a lot, in the sense is the mob has been around for 125 years.
Right.
They're not going to go. The mob hated Gotti because Gotti was so flashy. The mob is everywhere. They're supposed to be under the radar. They're not supposed to be flashy.
Mm.
So they have their hands in everything, wherever they can make money. So they're not going to go away. The Bureau, we have to keep the resources on them, because if we don't, they're just going to rebuild. The
Sure.
Bureau has done a great job. And like I've been fortunate enough to be part of teams that have dismantled three families, the DeCavalcantes, the Bonannos, the Colombos. But if you don't keep applying the resources, they're just going to rebuild. So I'm not shocked that they're still out there. They're always going to find ways to make money. There are some smart guys within the mob. There are always scams out there. It'd be funny if they just apply themselves in the right manner, right?
Yeah.
How successful they could actually be.
Right.
Um, but they always like to make a quick buck, though, too. So they're not going to go away. They've been around forever, and you just have to keep an eye on them.
Okay. Do you think they're still embedded in Vegas?
I would say so.
Okay. Yeah, because
Yep.
like you said, I don't think they're just going to go away. That's for sure. But
No,
if there's money to be made,
there's always an angle.
yes, of course. So The Sopranos. I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about The Sopranos if we're talking about
Yep.
the Cavalcante family. What did Hollywood get right and wrong about mob life regarding The Sopranos?
Well, I think what they got wrong is it's great for the show, right? But I really don't think you would have a mob boss confiding in a shrink. I
Yeah.
really don't think that would happen. I think that's kind of a stretch. Between the book that I have out there, that just was released, and the show, there's a lot of similarities, like such as if you watch the first season, right? There's the boss dies of stomach cancer. In real life, Jake Amari died of stomach cancer in June of 1997.
Wow.
Ironic, right? Even
Right.
though the director says he wasn't speaking to people, that's a really odd fact right there.
Yeah.
A lot of things within the show, such as the union angle, right? Well, in real life, the DeCavalcantes control Local 394, which is the labor union. They control Local 1030, which is the asbestos union. In the show, they had the gay angle. Well, in real life, John D'Amato, the acting boss that I mentioned that Anthony Capo shot, he got killed because John D'Amato's girlfriend comes to him and tells him that John D'Amato is taking her to sex clubs in New York City, and he's having sex with men.
Oh boy.
I don't care. I'm not judging, but in their world, that was viewed as taboo. Like, how could you have an acting boss leading our family and having sex with men?
And that was a plot line
So
in The
that,
Sopranos. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's another plot line within The Sopranos.
Yeah.
In real life, the show starts in January of 1999. In March of 1999, Ralph Guarino makes a consensual recording, which was great to play at trial, where we have DeCavalcante soldiers discussing the show 3 months into the show, saying, "This is you, this is you, this is you." Like that was great for trial, just to hit play.
Yes.
Even at the trial, Judge McCasey, who went on to be the AG, he actually gave instructions to the jury about The Sopranos.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of similarities between both the show and real life. Also, in the show, you had the stock fraud angle, right? The stock angle.
Yep.
In real life, Philip Brahma was known as the Wizard of Wall Street. Very smart guy about stocks. That's like in the show, there's a meat market. Well, there's a real meat market that's the Cavalcantes went to. So there's a lot of there's a lot of similarities between the show and real
Sure.
life. Even though, as I said, the director says he wasn't speaking to people, so it's a little odd to me.
Now, did the producers, director, actors, or writers ever reach out to the FBI while they're making this series?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
They might have spoken to people in New Jersey. I'm not really too sure, but from my knowledge, not that I know of.
Interesting. Wow. So, what do you miss most or the least about being an FBI agent?
What I miss most is the people, right?
Sure.
Like the bonds that you form is just amazing. Everyone has each other's backs, especially when you go through a door, right? That, you can't explain that to people, but
No.
the trust factor that you have there, and just the bonds that you have. What I miss, there's a lot of red tape, as you know yourself, so
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't like miss that, and the paperwork and that you're constantly doing. So, but definitely miss the people.
When did
Like
you
the bonds that
retire?
you
When
form.
did you retire from the FBI?
May of 2019.
Okay, right before 20. Okay.
Yep.
Now, you don't have to talk too much about this, but what are your thoughts on
Mm.
the FBI today?
I think the last couple of years, the FBI has taken a lot of shots, and it's unfortunate. You know what I mean? It's like we're kind of stuck in the middle. You have a lot of people that are just trying to do the right thing there, though. And just related to organized crime, I know resources have been reduced. It's always the needs of the bureau, as I said at the start of the show. I think the name of the game right now is the violent crime aspect, which is an important thing to be focused on.
Sure,
I
sure.
just don't want them to take the eye off the ball of OC, because it's important to keep your eye on that.
Yeah.
Because as I said, if you don't, the mob guys are just going to rebuild.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And unfortunately, no matter who the president is, the FBI seems like it always gets politicized. And the foot soldiers who are actually doing the work, their hearts are in the right places, always.
exactly, exactly.
But the puppet masters, like I said, no matter who is sitting in the White House, boy, do they get used and abused. It just, oh, it's sickening to see.
Turns into a no-win type of situation for them.
Yes, absolutely. Uh, so, what advice would you give someone who wants to be an FBI agent to prepare themselves?
Well, I still think it's a great job. You know, the physical aspect is something that you can control, right? So that's something, being top shape, right? There's no reason for you not to be. That's something that you can control.
Right.
And then cyber is the name of the game, right? Everything, relates to cyber. So take as many courses as you possibly can, and just try to distinguish yourself from everybody else. It's so important to do that. Try to be as well diverse and rounded as you possibly can.
Interesting. Okay. Now, your book, Flipping Capo, How the FBI Dismantled the Real Sopranos. Why did you write it?
A couple of reasons. The squad that we had, C10, as I had mentioned there before, right? The press really never put together that it was the same squad that dismantled two families at the same time.
Oh, okay, okay.
There's plenty of press out there related to the dismantling of these two families, the Bonanno family plus the Cavalcanti family, but they never put it together that it was the same squad. So
Interesting.
I'm hoping to get that out there. People approach me about my career that I've been very blessed. Anyone that tells you organized crime is just me, run like hell, because it's not. It's always a team. I've been very blessed in my career to actually be part of dismantling of three families. When I was approached, the publisher, one of the things that they looked at and they saw the book, they was like, this is not one book, it's two books, and
Yeah.
that's why this book focuses on the first part of my career, so that's why I wrote it, just to get the story out there. And then, like, the last part is, I'm not too sure of the relationship that Anthony Capo has with his family and kids, but hopefully this book kind of shows that he did do good. Yes, he did a lot of heinous acts that I would never condone whatsoever. But, he did do a lot of good for the government. As I said, he testified 7 times. And hopefully this book will get out there, all the good stuff that he did really help dismantle this family. And he started the whole thing. After him, as I said, I think 6 people decided to cooperate after he did.
Okay. So if the book, and by the way, I love the book. It's excellent. I highly recommend it. And like I said, I got the audio version that I really enjoyed that. Now, if the book ever becomes a movie or a TV streaming service or whatever, who would you want playing you or Capo?
That's a good question. Well, that's a stretch, but that's a good question. I have no idea, to tell you the truth. But
Okay.
sen-
Living or dead,
send
actor,
it to
living or dead.
what's that guy's name from Thor? Chris, like
Oh, yeah, I know who you're
Hemsworth.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Since it's such a stretch, we're going to stretch it there then.
Well, you know what? Maybe a young Liam Neeson I could see playing you. How's that?
Okay.
There you go.
I look good on the radio.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Tulsa King. Have you watched any of that?
Yes, I have.
What's your
I
views
like
on
it.
that?
It's good. You know, interesting of the area, right? Him
Right.
going out there to Tulsa and trying to take things over.
It's a
It's
it's interesting with like
creative.
the old family. He wasn't a rat. He did 20 years in prison
Right.
for him, and he gets out, and it's like it ain't like it used to be. We're not making the kind of
Yep.
money that we were, before you went in.
And now that he's starting to make money, they want a piece, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That they
Yep.
show their true colors. That's for sure.
Yes. They always have their hand out.
Yep, absolutely. I love that. So, have you received any feedback from retired or active FBI agents regarding the book?
Yeah, so far it's been really, really good. Because
Good.
one thing that I've seen, right, is a lot of people write books and it's me, me, me. And that's something that I try not to do here. I try to give people the credit that they deserve because, again, it's not just one person, it's a team. And this team that we had, C10, just tremendous people, selfless people to work with. And I never met a more bunch of people that had each other's backs and just willing to work hard.
Yeah.
And, I just try to portray that as best I could.
Yeah, and you did. That came across in the book. So, good on you. Um so were you ever like truly worried about your own safety, during all this?
Well, I think, early on when we had heard about the threat, it was a jolt, right? As we said, you're used to threats because that's part of the nature of the job. So
Right.
when you heard it live, it was a jolt. But then I worked the mob for so long. I worked the mob for probably close to 15 years. And I think they got to know me. And
Mm,
I've always treated them with respect. So no, I don't really feel like there's any danger. And, I think there's even recordings of them like on tape saying that I was a decent guy and I knew what I was doing. So again, it's all the way that you're raised, right? It's
right.
like just treat people with respect. And I
Yeah,
think that's the important thing to do. So
absolutely. So, what's next
and
for
and
what
as and as like we both are, right? We're both still armed. So,
Yeah, true story. I just got my HR
yeah,
218 renewed yesterday, so yeah, it's like
there you
okay.
go. There you go.
Absolutely. So, what's next for you? Another book, movies? What are we looking at here?
Well, I still continue to work in the private sector. I'm global head of security for a financial firm, so I'm still going to do that for a while.
Sure.
And then, as you just said, it's like, there's a second story to be told. Whenever I have time to do that, I think I'll write about the Columbos and the Bonanno family.
Okay.
Because what happened was in January 2011, I spearheaded the largest FBI mob arrest where we arrested 127 people that day. And then everyone thought, like we talked there before, the mob was dead, right? But they weren't dead. They just rebuilt. After that, the Bureau reduced the resources, and then I got the Bonanno Squad back.
Yeah.
So I had been sent down to run the Colombo squad, and then they gave me the Bonanno squad, and then they gave me the DeCavalcante squad as well. So then I had three families at once, and then we had some good types of like I think I mentioned to you earlier about the dig we had in June of 2013. So there's a lot to be written there, in the over
Absolutely.
the course of my career. I think I was able to recover 5 bodies. So yeah, so there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's wind this down. We've been going at it here for a while. Where can people go to find out more about you and your book, Taking Down Capo?
You can go to flippingcapo.com. You can buy it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And if you want to email me, it's flippingcapo@gmail.com.
All right. Well, Seamus, this has been a great conversation, and I'm gonna have to have you back on when you write the next book for sure.
Sounds good, Patrick. It's been great to meet you. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks everyone for coming back for the conclusion of my interview with author and retired FBI Special Agent Séamus McElearney. It was so much fun chatting about all things Irish, the mob, law enforcement, and his most recent book, Flipping Capo: How the FBI Dismantled the Real Sopranos. I can't wait for his next book. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Cops and Writers podcast. If you haven't done so yet, can you take a minute and rate and review the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? If you have already, thank you. As always, thank you for all of your support, and, of course, let's be careful out there.